Welcome to Lynn's Romance Reads. I'm Lynn, and this is the best books I read according to Goodreads. So, this has been going around a little bit, but I am a little behind the eight ball. I forget when I organized this list, but it was probably about 2 weeks ago, so I don't know if some of my August and September reads are going to have been on this list, and I missed it because I have this list that's a couple weeks old, but we're here, we're filming it, we're just doing it. So, couple rules. I have organized this so that only romances or books with strong romance elements are featured in my main list. And then I have an honorable mention for any YA or other books that I remember reading that popped up, and I had something I remember wanting to say about them. So we will start at the honorable mention section. So these are books that are rated high on Goodreads that are not necessarily romances. They're typically YA. So the first one is Shatter Me #3 by Tahira Mafi. It's been years since I read these stories. I read them in high school, so that was probably about 10 years ago. Obviously, they're doing a resurgence with TikTok. And I remember loving the original trilogy. I read book 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3. I think the intermediate novellas really help because I remember the original trilogy was only told from our heroine's point of view, and that the novellas, we got the heroes, or it's a love triangle, so we got the two heroes' perspectives in each, and it really helped bookend the series as a whole and really created a very believable arc. That being said, I tried reading #4, and I felt this when I read the City of Bones series by Cassandra Clare as well, that it felt like she had a complete story arc. The characters were in a good place, and then her books got popular and she tacked on books into the world. So I felt that with this book, with this series, and I felt that with Cassandra Clare's books as well. So I do agree. #3 is a very solid book. It's also #3 in a series, so that's one of the reasons why it's in the honorable mention sections. The next honorable mention is Harry Potter #1. I think that's Chamber of Secrets. Or is it the Philosopher's Stone? Regardless, I read these in late elementary, early junior high-ish. It's a little later than most of my peers read it. I want to say I read it in 7th grade. But I thoroughly enjoyed Harry Potter. I've read it once. That was sufficient for me. I've watched some of the movies, not all of them. Overarchingly, if you're a big reader, I found that there are many book series that never got the level of hype that Harry Potter did that are as equally as good or better. That's my personal opinion. It was also a trailblazing book, so I understand why it's #1, and it's one of the biggest recognized YA to children's fantasy series ever. So completely understandable that it is in our honorable mentions section. Next is the Tiger's Curse series, book #4. So I believe I read these in high school. So again, the honorable mentions are mostly YA books that I read over 10 years ago. So I don't remember everything, but this is a riff on Indian mythology, which I do remember being incredibly unique and very interesting because we don't see a lot of Indian mythology. We see a lot of Greek and Roman mythology. And basically, a girl frees a tiger from the circus. It's a white tiger. And it turns out to be a cursed Indian prince. And they go on a quest in order to break the curse, I believe. It's a multi-book series. It ends up originally being a romance between the heroine and the tiger shifter that she freed. Then it ends up being a love triangle with his brother. And about book 4 is when they lost me. Well, I should say, around book 3 they lost me with the plot. I feel like there was a solid arc going with book 1 and 2, and then it just got messy. And it was one of those things that I was reading it, and I had to wait like a year for the next book to come out, or maybe even more than a year, and I never wanted to pick it up again because it felt so convoluted, and I didn't need to continue on this journey because I felt like it was one of those things where the book that I ended, there was a good ending. It was a fuzzy HEA, but I could imagine the HEA, and then the epilogue ruined it. So anyway, we're spending a lot of time in the honorable mention section, but there's a reason why I wanted to talk about them, because I haven't talked about these books in years. So then the next is Shadow Falls number 4. This girl gets sent to camp as like a teenager, and it's kind of an outdoorsy camp. Only thing is, the majority of the people at that camp are supernaturals. And so I don't remember the full ins and outs, but there's vampires and werewolves and all that. It's very like early 2010s YA fantasy with the vampires and all that stuff. Vampires, werewolves, other supernaturals. I don't remember much about book number 4. It's number 4 in a series, but I remember it's a camp. Oh, and another random thing. The author was trying to push a safe sex agenda, and so the heroine's mother always was like passive aggressively pushing sexual health pamphlets on her daughter, and so the daughter would be like forced to read the pamphlets, and so she would spit out all these random sex ed facts and figures and stuff, and but I just remember being like, why is this in this book? And just being confused by it. I was probably a little young for the sex ed references, but yeah. But that's another very popular YA fantasy romance series, so understands why it's on this list. Then the last one is I'd Tell You I Love You, but then I'd have to kill you, or something like that, by Ali Carter. That's the Spy Academy series that she wrote. This was also one that's very popular. It has the girls in the boarding school skirts and kind of the magazine letter style words on the cover. Again, super popular, and it's book number 5. So obviously there's a pattern going on here. Obviously, as the later you get in a series, the stronger it gets. I don't remember much about the series other than the fact that it was a boarding school that trained girls to be spies. There was like a partner school that trained boys to be spies, and I know that they had some crossover in the later books, I think. I remember enjoying it. I obviously read through to book 5, but I think it was one where the series really just like got away from the author a little bit, where there were just too many books. I'm one of those people who really wants my series to end around 4 books. Much more than 4 books, and I start getting like it gets off the rails. So then we're out of the honorable mention section, so we're gonna go from number 10, so the lowest of my best rated, to my highest of the best rated. Number 10 is Taken by the Horde King by Zoey Draven. book 5 in the Horde Kings of Dakkar. This has an average rating of 4.39 for 2.5 thousand reviewers or raters, and I gave it 5 stars in 2022. This is tied with book 1 as one of my favorites in the series. I found the relationship between the hero and the heroine to be really interesting and very cool. There were a couple of moments where I was like, I'm not sure if it's gonna be taken home, but it was a great, enjoyable read, and I can understand why it's one of the favorites. Number 9, Demon from the Dark by Kresley Cole. Immortals After Dark, number 9. So this obviously is book number 9 in a long-running fantasy romance series. This one has an average rating of 4.43 stars out of 46,000, and I gave it 5 stars in 2021. So, if I remember correctly, our heroine is this like chosen one of the generation, and depending on who impregnates her, which whoever the child she bears will either be a turning point for the light or the dark powers in this world. And so in this book we're trying to protect her. I think that's the general consensus. And so I find it was a very good book, very enjoyable. There's not much wrong. There's not many books that I would choose to give 4 stars or less than 5 stars in the Immortals After Dark. So thoroughly enjoyed it, completely understand why it's on this list. It's also book 9 in a series, which definitely plays a part. Then next is Tin Queen by Devney Perry. This is number 6 in the Clifton Forge series. The average rating is 4.43 with 4,000 reviews approximately, and I gave it 4 stars in 2022. So I'm surprised this is the highest rated of the Clifton Forge series. The Clifton Forge series follows the men who work at a mechanic's shop, and the majority of them have ties to this old motorcycle club, the Tin Gypsies. And after several events, we never get a full picture of what happens, but they decide to disband. And over the course of these books, the rival MC that was a rival during the events that are happening are continually trying to kind of dredge back all the animosity and kind of almost push the heroes back into a life of being in the MC and being in a life of crime. And so the first 4 books I marathon through. And then my library didn't have access to Fallen Jester, which was book 5. So I took about 6 months off, 6 to 8 months off reading the series. And then Devney Perry chose to release the entire series onto KU for the summer. So I read Fallen Jester and then Tin Queen while it was on KU. First, Fallen Jester and Tin Queen are both 4-star books for me. Fallen Jester, I really think it was the tropes chosen and less so much the characters. The characters I was kind of behind, and same with Tin Queen. The tropes just didn't work for me. So going into book 6, our heroine is the daughter of the rival MC. And she is a lawyer, and so she, in disguise, visits her father and tries to kind of armchair direct the revenge plot. And so she says to her father, I'm going to seduce the last remaining member of the group, and I'm going to destroy them. Because the last remaining hero from this MC group is a kind of the hacker information collector also in charge of kind of the books and stuff. And so she's like, I'll infiltrate him by seducing him, and I'll steal the information we need to bring them down. Well, they end up falling in love. And I didn't like the level of deception in this. I hated how late she was on sharing her side of things. And I felt angry at our hero for knowing things didn't add up and just choosing to ignore it all that time. As I said, Tin Queen, I'm not sure I would have on this list. It's a strong read, and if you've marathoned through the entire Clifton Forge series, it might feel like a compelling end to the series, but for me, it's just not as strong as the rest of the books in the series, and the ending felt a little flat. Then the next book is Forbidden Dragon by Charlene Hart. This has an average rating of 4.44 with 2,000 reviewers, and I gave it 5 stars in 2022. So, if you look at Charlene Hartnady, she has a interconnected world, and so there are people I'm sure who have read that book as number 30 or so in the reading order. So I could understand how it's going to get a lot of people where it could be considered a late book in the series. This is also a very unique premise because the majority of these books are centered around a hunt. So they're all dragon shifters, and their race is dying out because there's not enough females. And previously, vampires and werewolves have come out into the public eye, but dragon shifters are not known. And so they've partnered with the vampires, who have a system to vet and bring in human females to mate with vampires. And so there are some people that get chosen to participate in the hunt and to potentially be mated with the dragon shifters instead of the vampires, who they may have originally been thought that they were going to be placed in. And so they're dropped off in the middle of the field, and then they're given about 2-hour head start, and then all of the eligible unmated dragon shifters chase them down and compete to have the opportunity to court this potential human mate. And so I forget where exactly in this series book number 5 is, but I want to say this is one of the kings of maybe the Earth Kingdom, because there's earth dragons, water dragons, fire dragons, and air dragons. So there's 4 classes of dragon. And so I believe this is an earth dragon, and there's a female doctor that's studying the reproductive implications of the human shifter mating. And so I believe it's their relationship, and it's forbidden because she's basically an employee. So it was a great book. They're on the shorter side. They're not quite what I would call a novella, but they're on the right side of 200 pages. So they're very quick reads. It gets 5 stars because of enjoyment level. Do I think it's a strong enough book to have been on this list? Probably not. I pick up that series like when I pick up Ice Planet Barbarians. It's really because I know what the story is going to be like, and it's an interesting read, relatively low angst. So it's not exactly hard-hitting, and at least in my opinion. Number 6 is Brutal Vows by J.T. Geissinger, 4.4 stars. There's 8,000 reviewers, and I gave it 5 stars in 2022. So Brutal Vows is book 4 in the Queens and Monsters series. This is Reyna and Spider. So in the world, Spider is Declan's second in command. He's kind of in shit after the way book 3 ended, and he basically volunteers himself for a marriage of convenience with one of the daughters of the Italian family. Costa Nostra, the Costa Nostra. And so he goes and courts the head of the Costa Nostra, and his sister, a widow, a black widow, is trying to prevent her daughter from entering a arranged marriage that is going to be to her detriment because she's been in a bad marriage. Of all the Queens of Monsters series books by J.T. Geissinger, I think this was my least favorite. I did not connect to Reyna as a heroine, and I felt Spider hadn't quite given me the growth that he needed to after the events that had happened in book 3. And I'll say that because book 3 is my favorite. So the things that he did in book 3, I really needed to see more of his growth to get behind him as a heroine, as a hero. And then Reyna, I really needed to see, I didn't see enough of Reyna's personality and Spider's personality and their relationship together to really believe their romance. It really felt their romance took a step back from all of the plot things that were happening and some of the serious connections that J.T. Geissinger was trying to make. So I agree that this series probably should be on my list of best books read. I'm not sure I would have picked Brutal Vows as that book. Number 5 is Sweep of the Blade. Number 4 in Ilona Andrews' Innkeeper Chronicles. I love this series. It is very light on romance, I will say that, but it's impeccable. So it has a 4.53 rating, 17,000 reviews, and I gave it 5 stars in 2021. So the original 3 books of this series follow our heroine, who I'm forgetting her name, and she's an innkeeper. So she runs an inn that specializes in peculiar guests, and most of these are aliens from different planets, and Earth kind of is across many shipping lines, and so it's used as a place, as kind of like a way station place. But because the majority of Earth people don't know about aliens, there are specific places that they have to stay, and so they're innkeepers. And there's a degree of magic associated with these innkeepers, where the inns provide their innkeeper with magic, but in order for the inn to have magic to supply their innkeeper, they need to have guests. And so that's kind of the premise of this series. In book 4, we're following our heroine from the first 3 books, Sister, who is rescued, and she and her daughter basically go to this alien planet that is kind of vampiric, and it's how the legends of vampires were kind of based off of this alien race. And so she ends up going there to live in that place and to help be a trusted person. And I found it to be very interesting. I think I enjoyed the original first 3 books a little bit more. I had a little bit more connection with the original hero and heroine from those first 3, but it was still amazing. And Ilona Andrews' writing duo is amazing. I can't wait to pick up more of their stuff and see where this series is heading. And I really enjoyed it. Number 4, Boarlander Cursed by T.S. Joyce has an average rating of 4.55 stars with 3,000 people rating it, and I gave it 5 stars in 2022. So these are novella length. These are less than 200 pages, read in 2 hours stories. So I will say there's not a lot of plot, but there is plot. It's not an exorbitant amount of plot. There's a lot of insta-love or insta-lust, and I eat it up because it is varying degrees of shifters. So in the series, there's multiple types. This is number 5 in a sub-series of an overarching world that it's book 22 in. Yeah. So you have a short, fun novella about shifters, and it's number 22 in the series. There's no way this should count on the best books I've read on Goodreads, other than the fact that it is cute, short, and fun. Then, the next book is Frosted Kiss, 4.5 in the Raven Falls series by R. O'Leary. So this has an average rating of 4.54 stars with only 141 reviews or ratings, and I gave it 5 stars in 2022. So the Raven Falls series is about a community of supernaturals, but this one is kind of a spin-off short Christmas novella. So obviously not that many people have read it, which contributes to why it has a high rating. And it was perfectly delightful. Anyway, but I really enjoyed reading the series. There's some really good gems in there, so I highly recommend checking out R. O'Leary's Raven Falls series. The next book is coming out September 30th, so I will be picking that up shortly. But perfectly enjoyable. Probably deserves to be on this list. The next book is Redemption of the Wolf, number 4 by T.S. Joyce. This is the same author as book number 4 on this list, Boarlander Cursed, and the average rating is 4.56 with just over 2,000 people rating it, and I gave it 5 stars. So this is a series that is a spin-off of another series, but I haven't read the book that the original series that it's spun off of. So I read it as number 4, and I believe I gave the first book in the spin-off portion 4 stars, 4 or 5 stars, but I had made a note that I could tell it was a spin-off. I didn't feel terribly lost in that first book, but as the series progressed, I felt more confused by the fact that I didn't know what was happening. I think overall it might be more like 8 in the series if you take the original and spin-off together. As I said, T.S. Joyce writes novellas that are short, fun, and enjoying. Doesn't deserve to be on the list of best books I've read according to Goodreads. And the last is Kingdom of Ash by of the Throne of Glass series by S.J.M. The average rating is 4.61 stars with 250,000 people rating it, and I actually gave it 4 stars. So for me to give it 4 stars, that means there were things that I really didn't like about it. But overall, SJM wrapped it up in a way that I was like, okay, I can live with this. But there were things along the way that I didn't love. And honestly, it's been about 2 years since I've read Throne of Glass in its entirety, and I binged it over 2 weeks. So there's going to be holes in what I remember of the story, and I couldn't tell you 100% of where I remember things falling in this series and why I disliked it, but overall, Throne of Glass, I understand why it's on this list. Those are the best books I've read according to Goodreads. The majority of the list I agree with. The series chosen, not necessarily the book indicated. And I ranted a large amount about my honorable mentions from YA Fantasy Days. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it. Let me know what you think of these books and if they deserve to be on the best I've ever read according to Goodreads list. And I hope you subscribe and join me for my next video, and I'll see you then.